All right, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's time for another exciting lightning talk. I'm Parag Katkar, your host for tonight. I'm the head of consulting practices at InRhythm. InRhythm is a modern product and technology consulting firm, and we have a lot of exciting content lined up for you in the upcoming weeks. Our lightning talks are hosted every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and each week, one of our practice area consultants they speak on latest and greatest technology trends in the industry. And this week, Veda Vyas Prabu, who is a senior SZ with us, is going to give us an overview of Applitools. Applitools is a next generation test automation platform powered by visual AI. And I'm really curious to know how this tool can help us increasing quality, accelerating delivery, and reducing the cost. So without further ado, let's get it started, Vyas.
Thank you, Parag. Hey all, I'm here today to talk about visual automated testing using Applitools. So before we dive into Applitools, I wanted to give an introduction about what visual automated testing is and why and when you may need it. So what is automated visual testing? Its purpose is to test an application UI elements like colors, fonts, and components renders correctly. So when I say components, it could be a button or an input checkbox. It could even be the entire web application or any application for that regard, any user-facing application. Usually, it's done. Automated visual testing is generally done after like development. Unlike traditional functional tests, where you can apply techniques such as test-driven development to write the test first, it'll fail because there's no code. You write the code and then update your test so that it passes. Unlike functional tests or unit testing, automated visual testing is generally done after development. You have to make sure that your web application or your mobile application is either hosted in a QA server or it's seen locally. So the next point is your application under test is prone to a lot of visual block. Think of this use case where QA engineer comes in and then catches a lot of manual, does a lot of manual testing, catches a lot of visual bugs. When I say visual bugs, I mean like it could be like a styling issue. Your application is like really prone to a lot of styling issues. This automated testing could be really good use case for your team to to invest in. And you want to make sure that if you want to run in different browsers, let's say you want to run your application in different browsers, automated visual testing could certainly do that. Some of the tools use like rendering engines to run against like browsers. So what a rendering engine could mean, for example, if you were to run a Safari browser's rendering engine is like WebKit. So it's not an actual browser, it's like the underlying engine. And on top of that, there's extra flavors that are baked into it. So most of the automation test frameworks, that has like automated visual capability uses rendering engines like Chrome, WebKit for Safari, and like Chromium for Chrome browsers. And it's highly effective for regression testing. So, every pull request that you make, especially if it's a front-end change, it'd be really useful for you to have like automated visual tests so that you don't introduce new regression and it helps you catch like visual defects. So now, what is Applitools? Applitools will help you solve all the problems that I listed in the previous slide. Applitools is visual testing tool that automatically detects and validates your look and feel of your applications. It could be a web application, it could be a native mobile application. It could even be a PDF feature. So it has like several integrations such as web testing, accessibility, storybook, and mobile. From my experience, I've used Applitools quite a bit. What I can tell you is the uniqueness factor is like when I compare Applitools with traditional automation test frameworks such as like Cypress or Playwright or even Selenium. I've used Sauce Labs provides a visual testing tool called Screener. And there's also like other tools out there in the market. I believe it's like Phantom JS also does like visual testing and we've also considered Jest Snapshot testing for for like a design language system project. If you take Jest Snapshot, it runs on node context and not the real browser, unless you integrate like external libraries like Puppeteer with Jest you're not going to run it on a real browser. This is some limitation with most of the visual testing tools out there. And the one common thing that I've seen with the most of the visual testing tools is that it uses pixel to pixel comparison. So now that will sort of lead you to a lot of false positive. What I mean by pixel to pixel comparison is that even if there's like a slight shift in your component, it's going to, even if that visual difference is not even seen by a human, it's going to treat that as a bug. So that is what a pixel to pixel comparison. Now, what Applitools does differently is that it uses machine learning techniques, and it also uses OCR under the hood. OCR is optical character recognition. It's been there for a while now, and it also uses other machine learning techniques to sort of do your DOM snapshot comparison. Moving on, let's look at some of the benefits that Applitools has to offer. The configuration is really easy to to set up. I'll talk about the configuration part towards the end of this presentation. I'll be doing a demo. Now it has a dashboard where you can monitor and track results. So Applitools provides a GUI, a dashboard or a web page where you can actually see what's going on, and what you monitor and track your different runs, see what browser your test was running, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that goes on in the dashboard, which I'll also be showing you in a bit. The next thing is it identifies and fix bugs quicker with root cause analysis. Now, this is one really cool feature that Applitools has. You can easily see, at what point or what caused, the visual defect, if there was one in the first place within the dashboard itself. Coming to the next point, which is like low maintenance in terms of writing code. Typically, if you have a web application or any application or front-end application, you could, your team would have, automation test frameworks that is built using like Playwright, Cypress, Selenium, anything. Applitools is designed to work alongside your existing automation test framework and not to replace it. So that's, and it really involves like writing minimal code, which I'll also be like showcasing it to you in the slides to come. And it runs tests on most platforms, all real browsers. Now, this point is like pretty important. It also runs i11, even if nobody is concerned about i11. I know it's like deprecated and completely ignored right now, but it's still pretty cool that Applitools is probably the only automation testing tool that I can think of, visual testing tool that I can think of, that properly runs on i11, without any hassle. So, and it runs on most mobile devices. It supports native mobile. So there's a few integration that native mobile Applitools supports. Like, for example, if you have an Android application, it supports Espresso, and I believe for iOS it uses XQI, and there's also Appium for general mobile, native mobile. So in this slide, you can see that there's like on the left-hand side, there's before Applitools, and on the right side, you see with using Applitools. Typically how, let's say you have a automation test framework that is designed to test like visual tests. Typically the way it works is you would first navigate to a URL, and then you would make sure that certain components or elements on the page are visible, and then you would perform some assertions to make sure that those components render correctly. So, imagine if, a front-end dev comes in and then changes some class name, your test will fail. You have to come in and then update your selectors. Or, like most modern applications have lazy loading feature. So from a testing perspective, imagine you have a component that lives like near the footer region, right? Or at least if you have a long page, it lives in the bottom of the page. So from a testing perspective, what you have to do is you have to programmatically write a scroll function that scrolls down to the bottom of the page. Then, sort of make sure that the component that you're looking for is visible, and then perform assertion. So it's a bit tedious and cumbersome. So there's a lot of steps involved. And if you were to change and update a class name in the front end, or you change some CSS property, your tests would need updating. So there's a lot of there's a lot of steps involved. With Applitools, all you have to do is you have to just say ice.check, and it's going to do a full page snapshot. Now you could argue that even with the existing frameworks, you could do a full page snapshot as well. But the difference here is that from my experience, I've seen that I've used Playwright, I've used Cypress before. If you were to do a full page snapshot, especially if your page is like really long, it has a lot of content, it doesn't really take the correct snapshot of the full page. It doesn't do justice. I've seen like really like false positives using like open source tools at least, and even Percy, which is like a competitor to Applitools. With Applitools, I've barely seen any issues. I think accuracy I would say is 99% of that, and that's what I expect from a quality standpoint. So on the right hand side is like very minimal code, and you don't have to, even if there's a selector change, you don't have to come in and like update your test. Or if there's lazy loading, you don't have to programmatically write a function that would sort of scroll down to the bottom of the page to overcome the lazy loading effect. As every tool, there's pros and cons. The Applitools dashboard for new users is a bit confusing at the outset, but over a period of time, it gets better. And this is one hot take. The pricing is usage basis. So for every snapshot that you take, for every browser, there's a cost attached to it. And the pricing structure could also vary based on factors such as, if you were to run parallel test executions, that could like spike up the pricing structure as well. And there's a lot of additional features within the tool itself, like accessibility, where you have to, or like if you want to ignore a certain region, there's also like cost attached to it. Even the root cause analysis feature, which I'll be demoing it in a bit, is also there's a cost attached to it. Yeah, I mean that's one con. So these are the steps we'll be doing to make sure that you have Applitools running in your local machine. The first thing that's pretty easy and straightforward is creating a free trial account. Now, if you hop over to once you do the sign up flow, you would see something like this, right? So this is the ice.applitools.com. Once you create a free trial account, you should see this window here. And the second step is if you need to export your Applitools API key. So for every account, there will be an API key. You need this to either work to be working in locally for local runs. If you're on Jenkins, now this is a secret, so it has to be, if you're using Jenkins or any other CI, it has to be stored somewhere. Like for Jenkins, I know we use Vault, so you have to store this API key and not hard code it within your configuration through an environment variable. But for the most part, there's two ways in which you can export your Applitools API key. The first thing that you do to grab the API key is you need to log in, and then on the top right section, you see the user, click on that, and you would click on this API key. Now, I'm not going to do that because it's a secret. If you click on this, it should give you an API key. And then there's two ways in which you can do that. One, you can export it through a terminal. It's like a command line argument. You could say export Applitools API key is equal to the key value that's inside this guy, or you could set it in a bash profile so that it's a one-time configuration thing. And then we will see in the demo how we can have like a configuration file to run your tests against like different browsers, and how to interpret test results in the dashboard. And then finally we'll see like how we can run tests. So for today's demo, I'll be running an Applitools storybook project. I'll quickly move into the code itself now. So before I talk about the code, I want to show you like what a storybook is. Like this is a storybook running in localhost, port number 9009. I'll talk about what storybook is, but I want to show you the demo itself right now. So as you can see, I want to run Applitools against storybook dev instance. I want to basically run visual regression to make sure that the components that we are creating do not break, and their styles or the components like render correctly per like design specs. So now what is storybook? Without getting too much into storybook, on a high level, what storybook is, it's a development tool used for building components, building, testing, and even documenting components in isolation. Um, you know, every component will have multiple stories under it. A story is nothing but a variant or a permutation or a combination. For example, a button could be disabled. It could be, it could have a width size of 20 pixels. There could be multiple variants. It could even have an error state. So I'll just walk through the project structure first. As you can see, I have a stories folder under that. I have like a few stories for button component, and then I have an app component here. A button component has like 2 stories right now with text and with emojis, and then app component just renders an app component. And then I have some styles here that belongs to those components. I'll just show you in the storybook itself. So this is a local storybook dev instance, right? Now, as you can see, there's 2 components here, a button and then app. Under button, there's like multiple stories or variants, right? One with text and one with some emojis. And then app has, this React app spinner. So this is how the developers will first create develop their web components. This is like the presentation layer, and this is where we'll also be doing the visual testing of it. So that's the context. Now moving on to the code, right? I want to show you a bit more. Now this is the real stuff, right? So the configuration is pretty bare minimal. There's a few keys here. There's a few properties here, like concurrency. Concurrency of 2 is set to 2 right now, which means it's going to have like 2 parallel executions. And batch name, I'm going to say it's Applitools Storybook IRDemo, which means it uniquely identifies this test run. And I have some browser capabilities. The snapshots that Applitools will be automatically generating will be run on Firefox browser, Chromium, Edge Chromium, and then mobile web. This is not native. This is mobile web, which means it resizes the screen to mobile, and then it will take a DOM snapshot. Now I have another property called include, which takes a predicate function. It's going to return a Boolean value. If you want to run specific stories of a component, you would do something like so. And then I have another property called save new tests, which basically will let you know if to save tests by default or not. So yeah, and then I have this package JSON where I'll be running this script called test. iStorybook -u is a flag for running Applitools on Storybook against a standalone server. For now, we'll be running it against the local Storybook dev instance. If you have, let's say you have a production URL, you would give that here. You could do that through an environment variable also, but for the most part, you can directly give your production URL here if you want to run Applitools on your production URL. So when I do npm run test, what it will do is Applitools will look at each story under the component and take DOM snapshots. Now it doesn't only just take DOM snapshot. DOM snapshot will just take snapshot of the HTML. It will also take snapshot of the CSS. That's the differentiator. Like no other tool that I can think of will take snapshots of your styling layer. So it's going to take DOM snapshots of each story. So for now, we're running only button component. So it's going to take DOM snapshots of this guy that you see here, and then this button with emojis. And the first time you run, since there's no reference point, it's going to be that test run is going to be saved as a baseline. You'll be prompted. Everything that you do will be seen on the dashboard, which I'll show you. And every subsequent run, DOM snapshots and snapshots of the CSS will also be taken and compared with the baseline. So that's the order of flow. So I'll be running the test right now. So what it'll do is it'll read each story for the button component, and then take DOM snapshots and then upload it to the Applitools server, which is this guy. This is the Applitools server. In a bit, when I click on this load latest batches, you're going to see it. So give it a bit. It takes about 30 seconds. Yeah, as you can see, it says save new test was set to false, and there are 8 new tests. So please approve their baselines in the ICE dashboard. So if we flip back to the dashboard, and so this is the dashboard. And if you click on the load latest batches over here, you see that there are a lot of tests. There were 8 tests that was generated. Now there's a lot going on the dashboard, but pay attention to the test. Like these are the stories name, right, with some emojis, and then this is the browser, and you have the device over here. So what you're supposed to do is you have to review each test, like go in, click on this guy, and then zoom in and make sure that for each test, each DOM snapshot test, the styling appear correctly per whatever that you're seeing in Storybook. Now you have to review each test here, and if you see any discrepancy or like visual issues in the baseline, you have to flag it. But for now, since everything is working fine, we are going to save this test run. The way you do it is you click on the stop checkbox, which will automatically, select all the remaining ones. Click on the 3 dots and then say that you've accepted the changes. Once you have done that, make sure to click on this save icon at the top right. So once you do that, you'll see a notification which says like successfully save changes to the baseline, which means the snapshots that you have taken on the first run are treated as a baseline reference. Now I'm going to run a truthy test because it's pretty much going to do the same thing. It's going to take DOM snapshots of each story from Storybook, and then it's going to compare it to the baseline. Since there's nothing happening right now, the test will pass. Since there's no visual difference in terms of I didn't change any styling, or the test should pass. It will say no differences found. The test passed. So give it a bit. It takes about 30 seconds. Oops, sorry, my bad. I should have done this. So I'll run it again, sorry. Ignore that run because I wanted to keep that as a baseline. So I'm going to run it again. If you flip back to the dashboard, you should see unresolved, but ignore this run for now. So you see here that no differences were found and the test passed. Flip back to the dashboard and click on refresh. Refresh like this. Usually that thing should work. Yeah, so it passed. There were no differences. Now I'm going to run a falsy test. I'm going to intentionally change styling for a certain icon. And before we even run the test, so as you can see in Storybook, I have this button with some emojis. There's no, it's white in color. The color is like white. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the background color to blue just to run a falsy test. So if I change this guy, the CSS value to blue, now if I flip back to Storybook, it was blue. So our baseline was white in color. Now since I'm running a falsy test, we should see some errors. And if I make sure that the config is right. Yeah, so if I run the test now, watch what happens. It will say a few tests pass, but then, there are some unresolved differences. Give it a bit. So I can see a few tests pass, and then there were some unresolved differences. Flip back to the dashboard. So you see here that these tests pass, but we only changed the property for this story, right? So if you actually head over to the test itself and click on this guy over here, and then click on the plus icon to just zoom in and highlight the differences. So you would see on the left-hand side, this was the baseline where the background color was white. And on the right-hand side, in the new test run, we see that the background color is blue. The pinkish region that you see here is the area of affected region. So it's not really a pink color. Now I wanted to, in my previous slides, I mentioned the root cause analysis feature within Applitools. So if you click on this guy over here and then you inspect, if you click on this arrow over here and then click on this icon, you clearly see that the difference in the CSS which led to to triggering the diff in the first place. Initially, in the previous baseline state, it was background color of white. Now it suddenly became blue, and you could say that you don't approve of this change, and you could just reject the difference and keep the baseline as is. So you could do something like this. And let's say you have a web page that you want to that has a certain region that is like dynamic. You have a hero which is like always changing. You could do if you could click on this ignore region, and you could just completely ignore it. So there's a lot of features. You can ignore a specific region from being like visually tested as well. But I'm not going to do that right now. And there's also like other features which unfortunately needs more provisioning from more licenses. So like I said, like it doesn't just do the snapshot comparison based on like pixel for like what other tools does. It actually gives you a cool way of finding out how or what caused the difference in the first place. And most of the work that you'll be doing will be within the dashboard. You run your test, whether it's locally or in Jenkins, everything will be posted to the dashboard, and then you could see what's going on with your specific run. And yeah, I mean that's all I had to share.
Cool. That's great. Really nice talk, guys. Let's open it up for questions. Any questions, guys? I was wondering when you started, if there is any flakiness with the test results, like we see with some of the other test automation frameworks. But you mentioned that test results are pretty accurate, right? That's pretty impressive for such tool.
Yeah, in my experience, especially with the design language system that we're building right now, I've seen that it was able to catch bugs that normally other frameworks would not have been able to. Most of the automation test frameworks use like rendering engines, like I told you. It doesn't use real browsers. For example, Safari would have WebKit, right? So in my experience, what I saw was the bug itself was reproducible in Safari browser, but not reproducible in WebKit. Which is like an underlying rendering engine, right? So and Applitools was able to like catch that visual difference. So I think it was pretty amazing. And so far, from my experience, I've seen that it has an accuracy rate of 99%. No tool is perfect, but even if the issue is not like seen by like a human eye, which is what a pixel to pixel comparison would do. This is not going to treat that as a false positive. This tool barely has any false positives in my experience. So yeah,
that's pretty impressive. Speaking of, you spoke about browsers, right? So if you want to perform these visual validations against different browsers or different operating system, I assume I saw you using a URL for your local host. So instead of that or test environment URL, basically, will you use a Sauce Lab browser instance URL over there? How would you integrate that with say Sauce Lab or any other tool like that?
So for Storybook, in this case, since I'm demoing the Storybook instance, a Storybook can either be present locally in local dev instance, or it has to be deployed to some QA URL, right? So I'll be just changing my standalone server to point to the QA server. Really, we wouldn't go through like Sauce Labs. Sauce Labs is you could run like a real functional test. There's like a video recording of what your functional tests are doing. And Sauce Labs has like a different tool that actually does visual testing called Screener. So Sauce Labs purpose is basically to monitor your functional test. Like there's like a video session of exactly what happened, like where did you click. It gives you like a complete video tracing of how your functional tests perform. And for Sauce Labs, there's like a separate tool that does the visual test. So yeah, I mean, it's just a separate area of concern. Is my.
But then how do you do your browser and operating system testing?
So the dashboard, your test will be uploaded to the Applitools dashboard that I was showing you just a few minutes back, and that's where you'll be monitoring your test results. So if you want to run it in like different browsers, all you have to do is like give different capabilities. Like you can just change the operating system. Whatever that you give locally is going to reflect in the Applitools. It has nothing to do with local configuration. The moment you run your test, that will interact with the Applitools server. It's just the configuration is just present locally, but it's actually running in their Applitools server, right?
And they
So
have
I
all
can
the
give Linux,
browsers and
all the browsers. Yeah, they have a like a cloud, that will run like cross browsers. So
nice.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that answers, guys. Oleg has a question. Go ahead, Oleg.
And so my question is, as you mentioned, I think this is great because you mentioned this, not only will this visually indicate where things did change, it will also tell you, like, let's say you were doing CSS updates, right? CSS changes. So in case there's like CSS, some developer does a CSS change and he doesn't, which produces the error, right, or a difference, that will, the Applitools will showcase, like point you to the change, right, in markup and
Exactly.
HTML, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it just doesn't do a DOM snapshot comparison. It'll actually tell you where, at what point your CSS, or what caused the CSS, what caused the defect in the first place, right? What CSS property that changed that led to the defect in the first place. So yeah, the root cause analysis feature is like really cool, and I have not seen this with any other tool, which takes like DOM snapshot of your, snapshot of your styling layer actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is great because you can imagine in a large design language system, right, you can have tons of CSS properties and variables going on, and things might change and break because the system is a complex thing. So this is great.
Yeah, it's
and this
really
will
useful.
point you to the exact location and
Exactly,
the property with that changed, right?
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Alexei.
Thank you so much, Vyas. Very nice presentation. I have a question. Because on our project, for example, we use different snapshot or visual testing libraries. I try to understand about Applitools. Can Applitools render specific component? For example, we don't need to load all application, and for example, we need to test 1,000 permutations for specific button. Is it possible that Applitools can do it?
So what is your application like? Are you talking about native mobile?
No. For example, web.
So for web, you want to make sure that you want to just validate certain components rather than entire full page snapshot, right?
Yeah, just one button.
Yeah, you could totally, ideally you would take a full page snapshot, but in the web section, I'm pretty sure there's like some ways in which you could check for certain components in the page itself and then do your snapshots. Yeah, it's totally possible, but ideally you would want to take a full page snapshot and then do comparison, because there's you could miss out on a few things if there's like any visual discrepancies, right? So you could definitely check for certain elements on the page rather than a full page snapshot itself in the website. I am not sure of the specific methods, but yeah, we could definitely do that. It's not impossible to do that. But the best practice from what I've seen in the docs is to take like full page snapshot and then do a DOM comparison, at least for the website.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any other questions, guys? Well, if not, then let's wrap it up. Thanks again, Vyas. Excellent talk. And as a reminder to you all, we do these lightning talks every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern time. And next week, Trevor Crawford, who is a senior Android engineer with us, is going to introduce us to Circuit, which is a simple, lightweight, and extensible framework for building Kotlin applications that's composed from the ground up. I'm really looking forward to this talk. Make sure you mark your calendar for next week. And thank you all again for joining. Have a great evening, and I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.